In your wanderings, you stumble upon a ruined temple buried deep within the heart of the forest. Wary, you continue on through thick overgrowth until you see a clearing that was once an ancient cathedral built by people, now rebuilt by nature itself. In the center is a preserved altar, stacked with various dice of all shapes and colors. As you contemplate what this means, a cloaked figure approaches from the shadows.
Welcome, brave adventurer. Have you come to roll the dice? Explore strange new worlds with new strange rules? If you seek adventure worthy of being shared with good friends, you have come to the right place. Just roll for initiative.
Welcome to the Nat One Nerds podcast.
Welcome to the table, everyone.
Hi guys, welcome back to Nat One Nerds. Today we're going to talk about our 12-step program for your spouse's tabletop role-playing addiction.
Now today we'd like to welcome our guests, Parker and Brandon, to the table. Why don't you two introduce yourselves to the podcast?
I'm Parker, and I am usually one of the co-hosts of this podcast.
Hi, Parker. Hello, my name's Brandon. I'm a TTRPG addict.
Hi, Brandon.
So, how does this program work?
Very slowly, apparently.
Yes, step one is admitting that you have a tabletop role-playing addiction.
I mean, I just did it on the air. Does that count?
Yes, but your co-host also needs to do so.
I have a small addiction.
Do not lie. You have a whole shelf of role-playing books.
Only a shelf?
I thought I was doing pretty good.
He's a little shellfish.
Hey, the dad jokes are my thing.
This is not your podcast today, is it?
As you guys can tell, we have on with us my wife, Savannah, and Brandon's wife, Afton.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
And they decided to take over the podcast for just a minute there.
So what we're really here for today is the character creation episode for The One Ring.
Second edition. According to the One Ring core rulebook, there are essentially roughly 12 steps in creating a character. Some of them are pretty self-explanatory and pretty straightforward.
So we are doing a 12-step program today.
That's what I was going to say. Oh my god. We've gathered you here today.
So, building a character for The One Ring. I feel like it's a pretty simple process, honestly. There's a lot less rolling, number crunching, and bookkeeping, it feels like, than normal TTRPGs have.
Yeah, it's more of a picking and choosing what you want, and essentially whatever you pick and choose, the book kind of just gives you what you need right off the bat.
Yeah.
I mean, there technically are some rolling options, but it's based off of a table, and usually, in my opinion, it's just as valid to just pick something from the table rather than rolling. But if you really want to make it as chaotic as possible, because sometimes that's fun, you can definitely do that. But as we kind of said, it's mostly just kind of picking and choosing the options that are listed in the core rulebook. And we are going to be building two characters today, as we will be building player characters for both Savannah and Afton. So as we've kind of described in the One Ring system, there are, instead of races like in D&D and some other TTRPG systems, they have what are called heroic cultures. The 6 heroic cultures that you have options in is you can be a barding, you can be a dwarf of Durin's folk, an elf of Linden, a hobbit of the Shire, men of Bree, and a ranger of the North. So if you want to be Eriador, that's the one you pick, is that last one.
I know you guys have been able to look into it a little bit. Do you have any ideas on what heroic cultures you want for your characters?
I already know I want to be an elf of Linden. Or did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not super familiar with Lord of the Rings, but I've seen it a couple times.
We're working on fixing her. We have our own 12-step program we're working on off-stream.
Oh my gosh.
It's okay. I'm in that 12-step program too, Afton. It's not just you.
12 steps of getting through all 3 extended edition movies.
It really does take 12 steps.
It really does. And lots of questions.
Yeah.
Which I am happy to answer.
Oh, Parker's like a kid in a candy shop with Savannah watching the movies.
Yeah. I want to be like Aragorn, because I can't be a writer of Rohan. Unfortunately. Somebody should make that.
So we've got our heroic cultures. You were being an elf, which honestly kind of makes sense. Afton, in our current D&D campaign, she's playing a wildfire druid fairy. She tends to lean more towards the Fey type folk, and an elf is the closest you can get in here. And then Savannah wants to be Eriador.
Yeah.
Which, I don't blame her. Aragorn's dope.
It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So what comes after picking your culture, and what does that really give you? Like, what does the culture do?
Yeah, let's take a look at the choices that Afton and Savannah chose. So, starting with Afton's Elf of Linden. The Elves of Linden are elves that live on the very western shores of Middle-earth. You kind of see a little bit of their home in the Grey Havens at the very end of the trilogy, when Frodo sails off west. That's an elven city. And they're also akin to Elrond, so if you want to imagine kind of what they're like, they're kind of like Elrond. They're high elves.
Makes sense.
Yep.
So with the cultures, they determine things like your attributes that we talked about in the last episode. Basically, that's your strength, heart, and wits. And just as a quick recap, strength is just like the general force of your character, like how physically strong you are, how strong your personality is, like how much of an impression do you make when you walk in the room or when you do something. And heart is more of like how caring and empathetic of a person are you, how in tune are you with those around you. And then wits is pretty self-explanatory. It's like how smart you are in your wits and how good your dad jokes are.
Yeah, it kind of roughly translates to intelligence a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's a little more encompassing than just that. So, a couple things to highlight about elves in this system is that they get the cultural blessing of elven skill. By virtue of their birthright, elves are capable of reaching levels of finesse unattainable by mortals. And the mechanic to that is, if you are not miserable, you can spend 1 point of hope to achieve a magical success on a skill roll. So to kind of reiterate miserable condition, is that in this system you have hope, and it acts like fate points, similar to Fate Accelerator or the Fate systems. And that you have a certain amount of hope, you can cash that in and be able to add a die to your main roll. As an elf, if you're not miserable, which is when you're tainted by the shadow more than you have hope, you become miserable. And essentially you could potentially get nat 1 scenarios, which nobody likes nat 1 scenarios.
Yeah, nobody does.
But as an elf, you can spend 1 point of hope to achieve a magical success on a skill roll, which will be highlighted a bit more in the actual play. Another thing is that it's called the Long Defeat. The elves find it hard to forget the taint of the shadow once it has left its mark on their spirit. So when it's time to potentially remove shadow because you can cleanse yourself a little bit during a certain phase called the Fellowship phase in this system, you can only remove a maximum of 1 point.
Like, entirely or at a time?
At a time, yeah. So you heal from shadow slower.
Lovely.
Which kind of reflects why the elves are leaving Middle-earth. There's just too much shadow going around. They're like, man, I can't get my hope points back. We better go to Valinor.
You know that's going to fix it.
Well, I mean, it is the Undying Lands. I mean, it doesn't sound like a pretty bad place to live, so.
Oh, I know. They're just leaving everyone else to die. But so
Okay.
Another thing that your culture...
Only a dwarf would say that.
Yeah, they abandoned us.
Brandon's playing a dwarf.
Yeah. So you get your attributes, you get a cultural blessing, which we went over, and it also determines your attributes directly. So your skills are directly tied to your culture, and it's kind of like a standard array type thing, where it just straight up tells you what your score for each one to start off is.
Yeah, exactly.
There are 18 skills in the One Ring, and they are all set based on your culture, and you can modify them with your calling and as you grow as a character. But as you start off, it's just kind of set.
It's kind of like similar to Call of Cthulhu, where technically you can level up in a sense, but it's
more of just getting better at your skills.
Yeah, it's nothing like D&D, where suddenly you're just bestowed with this great power that
all of a sudden you
would have
can cast Meteor Swarm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it doesn't always make sense, but this makes a little more sense. So let's go ahead and pick Afton's elf's attributes here. You can either roll a d6 and see what stats you end up with, or you can choose.
Let's roll. It's always fun to roll.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
So a 6.
Ooh.
So that means you have 6 strength, 2 heart, and 6 wits.
So how does that work out?
So you're going to put 6 here in rating. 2. And 6.
So that means you're a very strong, forceful elf, but you're not a very kind soul. You don't have much heart to you. But you're also really smart.
Oh. Well, that's going to be a hard character to play.
Now that we've got Afton's attributes picked for her elf, let's give Savannah a chance to work on her ranger.
Yes. Savannah has chosen one of the Dunedain of the North, blessed with long life. So you can be as old as you want.
I'm going to be 87.
Because that's how old Aragorn is in The Lord of the Rings. Alright.
And my character is 160, so...
Dwarves live longer than you Dunedain, so... They live long compared to other men, not other races.
So, Rangers of the North, what do they get?
So, cultural blessing for the Rangers of the North is Kings of Men. Some say that the lordship of the folk of Arnor is a thing of the past, yet the Rangers of the North have inherited the sinews of those men who wrested the ring from the burning hand of Sauron. You add 1 point to any attribute of your choice.
That's actually pretty solid.
Yeah, that's a solid blessing. You also get Allegiance of the Dunedain. The Rangers are devoted to fighting Sauron and his minions by an ancient tradition of war and strife. This obligation makes it harder for them to put their spirit at ease, even when enjoying a respite from adventuring. During a fellowship phase, you recover a maximum number of hope points equal to half your heart score. Interesting.
So it's like the Rangers of the North and the Elves have basically the same thing, but just different ways. They both get their hope back slower.
The Elves, they recover from shadow slower, while the Dunedain recover hope slower.
Okay.
So one is
Similar.
shadow, one is hope. So that's interesting. In this one, I feel like it's up to half. It's not just 1.
Yeah.
So, which kind of makes sense, though, because players are encouraged in the system to utilize hope.
That makes sense. So, Savannah, do you want to roll for your attributes, or do you want to just pick up?
Afton just put the dice in front of me, so...
Afton decided we're rolling.
Okay.
Rolling's just funner.
I can't argue with that.
Although it might make you a hard character to play.
Oh, that's okay.
5.
I got 5.
That's good.
So 5 strength, 5 heart, and 4 wits.
Pretty well-rounded ranger there, I would say.
I was going to say, those sound like good numbers.
You want to switch papers?
Maybe.
I mean, they always add up to 14, so you have the same number of stats, they're just allocated differently. You're just min-maxed for like a smart, powerful elf. She's more balanced.
So we need to determine their attributes and calculate their strength, heart, and wits target number, which is the target number is equal to 20 minus its corresponding attribute score.
So in that big diamond, you basically take 20 minus the rating, and that's what you put there.
So for Afton, she has a rating of 6 for strength, so her target number would be 20 minus 6.
So 14.
14.
Did you just pull out a calculator for 20 minus 6?
Yes. Are you judging me?
Maybe a little bit.
I'm not judging you. I'm an English major. Calculators are my best friend. So essentially what these target numbers are, in order to succeed in a skill associated with that, so like strength has certain attributes, hearts have certain attributes, and wits have certain attributes. When you try to use that attribute or skill, you roll a d12, you roll a certain amount of d6s associated with it, which we'll get to, and you're trying to beat the main number. So Afton, your character, your elf, anytime they roll a heart skill, you got to get an 18 or higher.
Jeez.
So,
No thanks.
but on the flip side, you only have to beat a 14 on strength and wits for your elf character.
So the highest, or the lowest number would be a 14, and the highest number is a 19?
Yeah.
For rolling?
That makes sense, because 6 is the highest it goes, and 1's the lowest.
Yep.
So once you have those target numbers, then it's time to set your endurance, hope, and parry. So for endurance first, you take your strength score and just straight up add 20.
Are we talking about the target number, or are we talking about the rating?
The rating. So you take your rating and add 20, and put that in the endurance box. And that's kind of like your hit points, but it represents the total endurance of your character, like how long they can go before resting, how much punishment they can take. Like, it's their endurance. I feel like it's a pretty good word for it.
So essentially, anything that would be punishing to their body, whether journeying, hiking, climbing, getting hit with swords or arrows, that kind of thing.
So basically anything other than resting?
Not that extreme, but...
Kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, endurance is also the number associated with load.
Load is basically like your carry weight.
Yeah, it's just your carry weight, which is more important in this system than it is in, like, D&D for comparison.
Yeah.
Where you can just have a bag of holding.
Load affects a lot of, like, what you... Not just what you can carry, but it mostly applies to what you're actually using and wielding and wearing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's basically so that some random scrawny guy can't be using, like, a full-on broadsword with a tower shield and plate armor. Like, it gets ridiculous. After we have endurance, the next is hope. So to determine the hope, you take...
Okay.
Oh, it's different for each one?
It is different for each one.
I didn't know that!
Yeah. Both of them are 20, though, for endurance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So for heart, for the elf, for hope, you take your heart plus 8. So your heart is 8.
2.
2, so you'd have a 10 for your hope.
So it's the rating.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you always use the rating, not the target.
Yeah.
And then for Savannah, you would take your heart plus 6.
Okay.
Which would give you 11, I believe.
Yeah.
And then I have 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And hope, like we were saying, that's basically the counter to shadows, and that's how much hope you have left in Sauron not destroying everything.
Yeah.
Basically. The next one would be your parry, which for Afton would be your wits plus 12 for an elf.
So plus 6 would be 18.
Yes. And then Savannah, it would be your wits plus 14 for a ranger.
So 8.
And parry is kind of part of your combat prowess. It's how effective you are at being able to, like, read your opponent and counter their movements.
Yeah. So essentially, in this system, your shield is associated with parry.
25, you have 26, I have 11, you have 10, and then we both have 18! Friendship!
Oh my gosh, we should be friends in the campaign.
Well, your character could speak Elvish. That's not too uncommon.
Legolas and Aragorn, I'm telling you, man.
It's set in stone. We're
And then
doing
you've
it.
got Gimli just trucking along behind him trying to keep up.
Making dad jokes.
Breathe.
Making dad jokes.
Just breathe.
This is going to be a fun campaign.
No, it's going to be fun.
Okay, let's keep going.
I've got a big head and little arms.
So we've calculated our derived stats, endurance, hope, and parry. So the next step would be recording your skill and combat proficiency ratings.
In the book, it has a specific list of your skills and your ratings in that skill. And there are 6 skills for each main attribute, totaling to 18. And these are just set as you start. And these determine how many additional d6s you roll when you're rolling for that skill with the d12. So, for example, with my dwarf, if he's rolling for travel, which is under heart, he has a skill of 3 plus 3, so he'd roll 3 d6s along with the d12.
Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you...
So instead of D&D modifiers where you have like plus 10 to a roll or something like that, you have plus dice.
And the ones that, like, under the skills, do you pick which ones you add to? Or
So that is
predetermined?
set based on your race.
Okay, so they're already predetermined.
Yes.
They're already predetermined, but there is a step here shortly that will allow you to shuffle it to make it a little more your own.
So you can make minor modifications.
You can make minor modifications,
Okay.
yep.
But for the sake of time, we're not going to go over each individual skill for each character because that's just bookkeeping work. So after you look at your skills list from your culture, what comes next?
The combat proficiencies.
Ah, that's the fun one.
Mm-hmm.
Combat proficiencies, you get a different choice depending on what your culture of origin is. For example, the Elves of Linden, you get to pick either bows or swords.
Bows or spears.
Those are spears. Sorry, I'm reading upside down.
So what sounds good to you, Afton?
Or you can mix. You can have like one of each.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm assuming Savannah's gonna have a bow, right?
I don't know. It may not be an option for me.
Rangers would have a bow and arrow, wouldn't they? At least in D&D, that's an option.
So for a ranger, they get a choice of spears or swords.
So yeah, I don't have a bow.
Wait, what kind of ranger doesn't have a bow?
I guess I'll take a
They
sword.
can't range.
Aragorn has a bow.
I mean, he doesn't use it that often in the movies, but
I
he
guess
does have
I'll
one.
take
True.
a sword.
I got the impression, if I remember right, is that he does have a bow. He does use it in combat, but I think it's more designed for hunting in the wild.
That makes sense.
So,
I'll probably do a bow then.
okay. So go ahead.
Oh, in the gear or in the combat proficiency?
In the combat proficiency.
Cool. So do I just
So
max
you-
it out?
No, you add you color in 2 of those diamonds for bows, and then you pick one of any other one and put 1 point in it.
Okay, so it's like you have a second offhand weapon if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you
think
have
of it
one
that way.
main that you put 2 in out of those 2, and then you have 1 extra point you can put somewhere else.
So if Savannah, if you wanted a bow, you could have a bow.
So for elves, you have that, and then so for Savannah, you put 2 points in swords since that's what you picked, and then you have 1 point to put in another one.
What is this? It got cut off on here. What's the top one?
Is it an axe?
Axes, yeah.
I think the last thing specifically for heroic cultures is the distinctive features. Elves, you can choose 2 of these features, so let me know what just sounds good.
Okay,
Where do these go on here?
that is true. That is a good question.
Where, like, if
Distinctive features are at the top to the right of the square.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Like right under the
I
name.
was like, if where are we writing this down?
That's okay. So for Elves of Linden, you can choose 2 of these features, and that is fair, keen-eyed, lordly, merry, patient, subtle, swift, or wary.
2?
2.
What is fair?
I mean, we can flip back and look.
Yeah, we can definitely look real quick. But if I recall correctly, they don't necessarily have any direct mechanical
They're just
consequences.
flair?
It's more for flair role-playing purposes.
Okay.
If I recall correctly. So let me double check. We can move it back. Fair. You are considered attractive by most people, even by those not belonging to your folk. So a couple of the other ones were lordly, merry, patient, wary, and I believe keen-eyed.
So I know I want keen-eyed.
Okay. What do your elf eyes see? So, as I said, these are more for flavor aspects. It's things that the lore master should keep in mind while running the game.
I'm almost wanting to go with stern.
Okay.
Because
It would
I
fit
have,
your attributes more.
Is
like-
stern an option though?
I don't know what's under there.
Nope.
No?
Yeah, fair, keen-eyed, lordly, merry, patient, subtle, swift, and wary.
You do fair and lordly.
Oh my. I'm probably between lordly and...
Keen-eyed? So
So I know I'm getting keen-eyed.
And then you're thinking lordly is the other one?
Probably lordly.
Okay. So Afton's going with keen-eyed and lordly. And Savannah. Let me know what sounds good to you. Bold, honorable, secretive, stern, subtle, swift, tall, true-hearted.
Tall. I like how tall is an option.
Can I go with bold and true-hearted?
Do it. So Savannah's going with bold and true-hearted. Perfect. And then according to this list, you choose a name and an age at this point. And if you need suggestions, the book does have suggestions.
I will need suggestions.
Suggestions for elves. Okay.
Afton, I suggest your elf is named Susan.
Why Susan?
Because you're crossing over to Narnia.
What?
So, I'm not going to try to pronounce all these, but the ones I believe are pronounced this way. So, we have Eleanor, Elwing, Idril.
Oh, see, I read that Eleanor. But maybe that's just me reading stuff weird.
I think
it's your character. You can pronounce it however you want.
That's true. Technically, you can. So, that's how I'm reading it. Nimloth?
I'll probably go with Eleanor.
Eleanor? Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Eleanor of Linden.
Yeah.
All right.
What about you, Savannah?
Savannah, do you want suggestions, or do you think you got a cool Ranger-esque sounding name?
I don't know about Ranger-esque sounding, but...
Yeah, it's could always pull a swap room.
Oh.
Have an elf named Eowyn and a human named Arwen.
There's a couple suggestions that overlap with the elves, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, which doesn't make sense. The Dunedain heavily respect the elves.
I'm just going to put Genevieve, because I like that name.
Genevieve? All right.
Sounds good.
Genevieve the Ranger. Perfect. The next step would be to choose a calling, which I think we've determined is similar-ish to a background in D&D.
Yeah.
It gives you a little more context and a little bit of mechanical option, but that's about it. So,
available callings.
So, Afton. From Captain, Champion, Messenger, Scholar, Treasure Hunter, and Warden, what sounds good for your character?
Either Messenger or Scholar, but I think I'm going to go with Scholar.
Scholar?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, and these callings are more suggestions reflecting lifestyle rather than a particular occupation or career. Although, if you wanted to play that way, you could. Or if you pick Messenger and you literally want to be a messenger, that's how you make your living, you can totally do that.
For example, my character, the Dwarf, he has the Messenger calling, but he does it in the way of like a traveling bard type of thing, where instead of delivering messages, he goes around and collects and sings songs.
Exactly. All right. So, Savannah, for Genevieve the Ranger, Captain, Champion, Messenger, Scholar, Treasure Hunter, or Warden?
I think I'm going to go with Captain.
Captain?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, let's see. Afton chose Scholar. For you, knowledge makes the wild world a less threatening place. Yellowed maps and lost books replace a fear of the unknown with curiosity and wonder. Songs composed in ages past strengthen the weariness of hearts. A love of learning guides your every step and illuminates the way for you and those you listen to your advice. Favorite skills. Choose 2 skills among craft, lore, and riddle and mark them as favored. AKA, you get advantage on those rolls every time.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
Can you read again what the favored 2...
You can choose 2 out of 3. Craft, lore, and riddle.
Okay.
When you say get advantage, does that mean you fill all the spaces?
It means that you roll 2 d12s and take the higher one when you're rolling.
So
you would just mark the box.
Okay.
The box
I was going to
box.
say, how would you mark that on here?
Yeah, the
So
box
I'm gonna
means
do
favored.
Lore
Okay.
and... Do I want craft or riddle?
Funny enough, all 3 of those line up in your strongest
I know.
attributes there, yeah. And strength and wits.
I'll do craft.
Craft. Interesting. So maybe you like to tinker with stuff a little bit, trying to figure out what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, cool.
You made your own bow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sentimental value, and it works great.
And then what about for your second one?
Oh, I chose lore.
Okay.
Let's see, Savannah, for Guinevere.
No, not Guinevere.
Genevieve, sorry. Genevieve. All right.
Gigi Genevieve Esme Squalor.
You can call her Jenny for short.
Genevieve. Captain, when the world is on the brink of ruin, it is the duty of all individuals of worth to rise and take the lead whenever the risk. Mm-hmm. You have chosen to put your judgment to the service of others to guide them in this dark hour, but you don't want others to heed your commands out of fear or obedience. You want them to follow you because they trust you. Yep. Favorite skills. Choose 2 skills among battle, and hearten, and persuade, and mark them as favored.
I'm going to do Enhearten
Okay.
and Persuade.
Okay.
Sounds like a good captain.
Yep. Really focusing on those leadership attributes.
So she's the party face.
The next step is that you guys get some experience points because this system does not start you at a level 1. You actually have some adventuring under your belt.
Yay!
However large or little that may be, you have it. And that counts for something. Previous experience for newly created player heroes. Players have 10 points to spend on raising skills and combat proficiencies. The cost, so essentially what it is, it's a skill cost system. So to raise a skill 1 point or 1 tick or 1 mark so that you get that extra die, it costs 1 point out of the 10. To go from 1 to 2, 2 points. 2 to 3, 3 points. 3 to 4, however, 5 points.
So it racks up fast.
Especially that last one.
So I have a question. So with the skills, we already have like a set amount of skills based off of our
Your culture.
Your culture. And if you already have like say 1 tick in persuasion, like 1 box in persuasion, but you wanted to go up to 2, would it cost you 2 points or what?
It would cost you 2 because you already have 1.
Okay. So it's not like...
So it's cumulative with what you already have.
So
Gotcha.
what do we already have in these, though?
So...
That is in the array that we have in the skills, so I think we'll save that one also for later, just to spare everyone the bookkeeping of putting down all the numbers.
That's fair. And then you choose some starting gear here real quick.
So this is where your endurance comes into play because it determines your load, which is how much gear you can carry.
Mm-hmm.
So as someone who already has a little bit of adventuring under your belt, you're going to already have some gear.
Yep, exactly.
So that's things like, for example, my dwarf, he has a large 2-handed axe, a coat of mail, and a helmet, which would normally be a really heavy load. But because he's a dwarf, his cultural blessing is his armor takes half the load of normal. So he's able to have all that heavy gear.
So, but your guys' cultural blessings do not relate to endurance or load. They are what they are. And that's also probably something else that we can do off the podcast.
Yeah, we can determine gear, things like that.
Essentially, the rule book does have this really awesome chart for weapons, armor, and shields. You know, each one, it talks about the damage, the injury, the load associated with it, the combat proficiency, and then any other notes that would be needed to be noted about them. I feel like it's a pretty nice little chart. And then all that is left is record your valor and wisdom scores. And which I believe you start at 1.
For both?
Yes. All players get to choose 1 virtue and 1 reward, selecting them from those listed in Chapter 5. Yeah, so the last thing is, Valor and Wisdom scores at 1, and then you get to choose 1 reward and 1 virtue. Okay. General virtues are, just to quickly list some of them, virtues list is confidence, door-handed, hardiness, mastery, nimbleness, and prowess. And they're pretty straight. Some of them, like hardiness, raise your maximum endurance rating by 2 points. Nimbleness, raise your parry rating by 1 point. Mastery, choose 2 skills and make them favored as well. Confidence, raise your maximum hope rating by 2 points. That's a nice one, actually. I like that one. Let's see. Door-handed. That's probably the most complex one. When inflicting special damage in combat, add +1 to your strength rating on a heavy blow and +1 to the feat die. That's very specific for combat scenarios. And then prowess, that's also a nice one. Lower one of your attribute target numbers by 1. So, for instance, Afton, if you want to lower that 18 target number for heart, for any heart skills you want to use, you can pick prowess and you can just lower that by 1 if you wanted to. But again...
That's a nice thought.
Yeah, so it's kind of nice. There's a couple of really nice ones. Because sometimes the simplest ones are often the nicest ones, in my opinion.
Yeah. And then past that, we've got cultural virtues, which there are a good amount to choose from, but some examples are Dragon Slayer when you're fighting a creature with 2 or more might, all your attacks are favored. Or you get Fierce Shot if you're making a piercing blow with a ranged weapon. The protection roll of the opponent is ill-favored. Things like that. A lot of things that help you out when you're actually in the field. So that's something where there's a lot of choices to pick from. So that's something else I think we can work on a little bit later.
Yep, absolutely. And then the last thing for Pacific characters is there's a rewards list, and they give you a small list of like specialized or magical items that you can potentially start out with. So, but that's also something that can be picked. For instance, you can pick a fell weapon, add 2 to the injury rating of the selected weapon, so it does more damage essentially.
Yeah. So it's kind of like minor magical items.
Yeah, minor magical items, because, yeah. And then the only other aspect is that there are certain things associated with the party as a whole, because the system classifies your adventuring party as a fellowship. And there are fellowship attributes depending on the patron and other factors that then bleed over into the character sheet that can be used as a party. For instance, there's a fellowship score. It's a pool of usefulness that you can pull from.
It's basically a party-wide hope pool, kind of.
Yeah, it can be. It can be that. It depends on the patron, though. So each patron, the fellowship score does different things depending on the patron that they work for. So if you work for Gandalf, you get one thing. If you work for Balin, I believe it is hope. If you work for Balin, it's like almost an extra hope pool to pull from. Which is things that I think would be better explained in the actual play before we start.
Yeah, a lot of these later parts don't really make any sense until you're actually playing.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that, I think our characters are pretty well fleshed out to be able to launch into a one-shot of the One Ring. Thank you guys for tuning in for our character creation episode. Hopefully it was informative. You guys got to learn a little bit about how a character is made in the One Ring system. If you have any else questions, tips for us, advice, anything you really liked, feel free to reach out to us on Nat One Nerds Podcast on both Facebook, Instagram. We've got nat1nerdspodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you guys, so make sure to reach out, and we would love to see you.
Yeah, so.
Well, hopefully you guys will be able to tune in next time for our playthrough of the One Ring. And until then,
happy rolling.